Hello, my name is Michelle, and I have been doing this channel now for a couple of years, but I'm obviously not very consistent. For the first few years, for many years of homeschooling, I have been using Heart of Dakota, and it has worked great. And I've made lots of videos about those, which I look back now and I think, oh my gosh, the quality of those is so bad. But I looked great. I was in a healthier state of my life, and it was fun to make those videos. So now I'm like, okay, those videos are going to inspire me to get back in health. Anyways, um, we started to get to an interesting place just a couple years ago where my oldest son, it was like he was kind of pushing up against this ceiling of learning, where he was at a point where I'm like, I've got to slow back for him. And it was at a point where he was needing more than I could give him in his level, and all the others were doing fine. But I started to feel kind of scattered, and I think we could have kept going forward if I had maybe been patient or just scaled back, maybe combined him with my second. But I don't know. I feel like the Lord sometimes does things in the most amazing ways sometimes. And he started to prompt me in my heart that I needed to do something different for him. So I made a whole other video about that process and what I did specifically for him that year to change up his, which would have been sixth grade year. And then my others, I kept on the Heart of Dakota lessons that they've been doing all along. And then I started to feel the prompting again back kind of in the middle of that year, where I was like, you know what? I don't know how much longer I'm going to have all of them together. And I had this place in me that I just thought I would like to have them all together as one. And because I was a teacher for so many years, I've got just general curriculum. I love to write curriculum, but I had been kind of scared to do that for homeschool. And it was like the Lord was like, Michelle, you went to school to become a teacher. You know how to write curriculum. So trust me, hold my hand, and we're going to walk together and do this. And what was so cool was I just kind of picked up a pen and paper and went. And from about January of 2022 through about this late spring, I just wrote and created and picked and chose from things. But what I decided was, I was like, you know what? I'd really like to have a year to focus on world geography. And because, so much of homeschooling curriculum in general is on America, which is great. You need to know that history. It's super important. Or you get to like the ancient history. And I just got to the point where I was like, you know what? I just want to take a year and focus on the world, each continent, and look at how we can study it, look at the cultures, look at the art, the food. And it just started to grow from there. So this video is not a Heart of Dakota video, but I will be having one because I got the new catalog, and I'll be making one of those soon. So anyway, so what I did for 2022-23 year was completely new to me. It was fun, challenging at times, but at the same time, it was the right thing to do for my family. And I feel like my big message is that you have to trust what the Lord puts on your heart. So if things don't feel 100% right, sometimes that's because you're growing and you're becoming something through that challenge. And there's other times where it's like the door is closed and it's meant for you to go, okay, Lord, where do you want to take me? So that was one thing that I just said, okay, I'll follow you where you want to take me. So one of the first things I decided to do was go old school. And I first printed off a calendar. Sorry, this is a lot of mess on here. But what I did on this calendar was I just said, okay, I know I want to get 180 days. And I want to end by Memorial Day. So I started in May and I started counting backwards, and I just figured out all the days I wanted to do. So I knew that ahead of time. And then I looked at how many months that I had. And I thought to myself, okay, I have this many months I need to get through, and I have 7 continents. So how can I balance that out? So I decided to take, give or take, I'll go through that specifically, but give or take a month for each continent. I took December specifically for the Middle East. And then I think I took like the beginning of August and September for Europe because that was bigger anyway. So I'll walk through that. But I just was like, that was my framework. That was my thinking, was like, okay, world. And that was my basic kind of geography timeline. But then I took a step back and I said, okay, what else would I like to happen throughout the year as well? So I'm going to kind of go through that, but again, show you how my brain worked. Okay, so old school teacher, this is what I did. Rather than type, I just went to pen and paper, and I went through 180 days, including field trips, including ideas that would be holiday related. And I just went for it. Now, this was new to me, but it was familiar. It felt like I've done this before. I can do this. And by the time I got to the end, it was this breath of air of like, wow, this year went really well. So I can now say, after going through the whole year, that it went pretty well. So what I wanted to focus was that every time we sit down for breakfast, our main focus was Bible. Now, when we were doing Heart of Dakota stuff, I would often use that as a time to do our Bible study or to do like a history reading, or I'd make breakfast at a specific time for school. But what I did this year is I said, you know what, I'd really like that breakfast time to be Bible, because so many times we get little snippets here and there, but we've never actually gone through like a chapter at a time. So I took 4 sons and I had each of them do a reading. So there'd be we started Genesis, we started in Matthew, we started in Psalms, and we started in Proverbs, and we just started to go. We just did one every day. And then each of them had to read out loud, which was a challenge for my then 6-year-old, or no, was he 7? Anyways, but he had to challenge himself to read some tricky stuff. And then we got into some tough subjects as we got into Leviticus and other places. And I think what was so beautiful was that as we took the Bible throughout the whole year, we didn't make it through the whole thing, but when we read through it was able to bring some discussions up of like, well, why is this in the Bible? What do you think God's trying to say in this? Or, wow, Leviticus can be hard to read, but guess what? Sometimes you have to, like with a garden, you have to plant and you have to dig up and you have to look for the truth in there before the bloom will come. So anyway, so that was my goal with breakfast. And then also, I can't show you this, but I have like a sticker map of the world on my wall next to my breakfast table. And what I did was I made sure that we prayed over different countries in the continent we were studying. So if we were studying Europe, we would take a different country each day to pray for, or the general continent, or the people in that continent. And then if we were in a country that was, or a continent like North America, we might focus more on the states or about like the just issues of the day, that kind of stuff. And then also I try to put on a worship song at breakfast every day. Now, getting through 4 chapters in the Bible and prayer and a worship song was a little bit probably overreaching there. But what I started to do is I would put the worship song as I was calling people in for breakfast, and then they would kind of sit down and get ready and eat just a little bit before we went into the Bible reading, so they weren't just shoving food in their mouth. So at that point I said, okay, that was our beginning. And then they went off to do their chores and various things, and I can do the dishes and walk the dog, that kind of stuff. And then we had like another gathering time where we got together at the table, and this was our time to be together. So this was our geography thing. So how I did our geography is I found a bunch of resources, and I don't have all my atlases with me, but you can just use any general atlases to help you out. But I found this book on, was it christianbook.com. And it's an interesting book because it goes through the continents, but every day has specific questions that you can ask your children, and then they can use the atlases to find the answers. Every so often we'd have to look up on Google or something because it was a specific research type question. So I would just, each of these are different levels. So I would just rotate through my kids, and I'd just do one of these each day related to that continent. Now, we'd only do these until we got to the end of that stuff for that continent, but we would use these. And then another resource I used for geography was this one. So through, again, Christian Book found this as well. This would go per continent, and it would be different art projects. Now, you can decide with your own children. Some children are more interested in art than others. There also was good overviews and maps that were in here as well. But again, you know your children. So if you know that they love art, then this is something that you could try. Now, my kids, I call like so-so art kids. They're not just pulling out crafts, doing them all the time. But if I would set up an area specifically with an art project on it, and that was part of their assignment, then they would make sure that they would do it. And then they'd go, oh, I do like this. So there were a couple in here that worked really well. We didn't do all of them because time, but also interest and that kind of stuff. I'm trying to think of something that we did in here that was really fun. I'm, of course, turning to all the pages that we didn't have. And then in the back, there's also some recipes for things like Play-Doh, and then there's templates and stuff like that. So I did do some art from here. And then I even just got a book like this it has a whole bunch of just maps that you can just print off. So what I did at the beginning of the year is I went through and printed off maps and set up binders for each of my kids that had all the maps for the continents. And we would sit down at the table and we'd ask the questions, the geography questions, and we'll look through the maps, and we'd often label the maps of those continents. So we'd label the country. The older kids can do capitals, the oceans, the rivers, the mountains, that kind of stuff. The cool thing about this book is after the question pages, on the next page, they would go through and give you activities and ideas that you can use for that specific continent. So it gives you the map activities in there. And then it gives you a whole bunch of activities related to that continent. And also just ideas and vocabulary words you can use if you choose to. And then each of the continents has at least 3 or 4 pages per continent. So that was pretty nice as a general resource. So that was kind of my in the past I would call it like my history curriculum, but this was like my spine of my altogether geography curriculum. So then in the midst of that, each day would be different. Some days would be just mapping. Some days we would be watching videos about geography. I just realized in the whole month of August, we spent on just geography terms and map terms and that kind of stuff, because I wanted us to understand, some of those kind of things as well. So anyways, that was our first kind of month of things. Then we would do different things where we'd make a Salto map and then have to paint it and write the names on it that way. Other times I would divide, especially some of the countries or the continents like Asia or Africa or Europe that have a lot of countries. I would take a day where I'd say, okay, here's 4 countries to choose from. Each person would pick their own. They do their own research. Then we'd come together and talk about it. We did the same thing with animals from those continents. We would have each person kind of report on a different animal or a different country. They would talk about the capitals. And at my library, it was great because they had wonderful nonfiction books about the different countries. So each month, when I'd start a new continent, I would go and I'd kind of gather all those books for those countries so that the kids could kind of use that as like a book basket they could pick from if they wanted to. So those were some of the things that we focused on. Again, we did each of the continents. And then other things is that, so if we were in a month where we were talking about Asia, I would try to take us to a Asian style restaurant so that we could, or at least make the Asian style food. Oh, that's the book I forgot, was my cooking book. I had 2 books that also have a whole bunch of recipes as well. So every month we'd be cooking recipes from those regions and talking about them. And some of them were hits. They loved those recipes. And other ones we kind of just did. And then it turned out to be a disaster, but it was just fun to do cooking together. One of the librarians from our library is actually from South Africa. So I invited her to come over and talk to us about South Africa. And she came over, we made a meal for her. And then she brought some artifacts from South Africa, which was really neat. I have a friend who lives over in Sweden. So we talked about Europe. We interviewed her and her children and talked to each other in English over a Zoom call. And so, there's all kinds of really great opportunities where they can kind of immerse themselves each month in those specific months. So that was kind of fun. I really liked that kind of aspect of it. And then again, they each just kept their own individual binders that they would keep, and they'd fill in their maps or they'd put their reports or that kind of stuff. So again, you can make it as big or as small as you want, but that was our main thrust of the morning, was that. And then after that, what I did is I had something called individual time. So each of my kids, and I'm sorry, this was a year's worth of mess. So I'm trying to find one that's actually sort of clean. I guess that one works. So each kid would get their own little chart. And this was what I call their individual time. So when I would do Heart of Dakota, this would be like, I'd have a checklist each one of them would do to get their own work done. So this is the same concept. I just made my own chart. So each day they knew what they could do. So for example, this child on Monday would have grammar. Now for me, I was able to find some free grammar lessons online, which I talked about in my other video because I used that before as well. And I printed off all of the worksheets and then put them in the binder. And then each day they just got to do one lesson each day. So that actually worked out well. So this child would start off with grammar every day. One day of the week, they would do Easy Peasy Grammar, which is an online thing, which I will show you here soon. And then they would go to math. And at the time, said in the other videos as made too, that we switched over to Good and the Beautiful math this past year, which was amazing. And so that's another video another time. But each of my youngest three children did Good and the Beautiful math. My oldest was still doing some teaching textbooks mixed in with printed off Good and the Beautiful kind of level 6, which was a little, I mean, in terms of a number, it was lower than his grade level, but in terms of quantity and quality, it was about his level or higher, I think, than what he had been kind of used to in teaching textbooks and that kind of stuff. And then this child would go to having a devotional. So there would be like each one of them had a different devotional. Again, you can choose whichever devotional. And then I had my younger ones do something called Night Zookeeper. We just tried something different to do something online, and that worked fine. Also on Easy Peasy, they did some computer lessons on there, and then also they had, I can find this, different ones of them had variations of writing. So they would get, I discovered handwriting without tears. I'll probably make a video just about that specifically. But my goal was, let's just let them free write. I was doing the Night Zookeeper as a way to kind of do creative writing. But then for actual writing, they would have to create stories. Now, this is my youngest, so he wasn't getting super detailed. But some of them kind of would get a little bit more intensely into it. And I can't vouch for their handwriting. This one was a little interesting, but we would just write some stories. Now, I discovered pretty quickly that these actually my kids weren't really quite the ready for level for this, or did they desire to do this? So we often then would do, I'm doing the handwriting ones. Where are the other ones? So I'm sorry, I guess I don't have that one with me, but that we had this writing book that came from them as well. And it was creative writing. It give them prompts and they have to write down their ideas and those kind of things. So I'll try to make a separate video about the handwriting stuff. But sorry, that was the writing section. But then they also have a handwriting book that they used too, which was great. It was just real simple. My son kind of was going a little crazy with handwriting. But I figured that handwriting, especially with boys, they really need extra practice on it. And it helps with their spelling and that kind of stuff too. So this was a great tool for my, even my second oldest needed some help with his. So and with printing, just printing, basic printing. And he's going into 6th grade this coming year and his printing is finally getting a little bit better. But I really liked these, and I'm sorry about this. My child likes to write over everything. But then in the back, there's also stuff like there's grammar stuff even within the practice handwriting as well too. So I really recommend, if you have an older child who doesn't like cursive, who is not very good at printing, the Handwriting Without Tears Can Do Print was a really good resource for them. So writing, handwriting, and then we also did PE, which was on, again, Easy Peasy. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take you to the Easy Peasy website and show you how we used it to help us with our individual time. Okay, so this is the Easy Peasy website, which I've talked about in another video, but what we specifically used this for this year was we did actually have a little bit of geography from here. So I can go over to history. There is a geography section. So if you're like, that's great that you wrote your own curriculum, but I am not comfortable with that. They have their own one here called History, Geography, and Cultures. And again, everything in here is free. You may choose to print off some of the worksheets if you need them. But so in our actual geography section, there were times when we needed to supplement because maybe it was a continent with not as much, or if we got to a point where I'd already gone through all the recipes and all the art and all the other things, I would come to this as like my third resource. And each one is in different levels. So let me just kind of come down a little bit. The first kind of portion of this is geography terms, just kind of like I was doing. And then mixed in throughout here, they go through the different continents. So this one starts with Europe. So if you notice on here, there's parts you can do, there's parts you can choose not to do. So often what I would have the kids do would be to do these map games called Cetera. And so that would allow them to take physical maps of a continent. They could hold their atlas in their hand and they could use this and they could practice putting the countries of Europe in their Africa or South America. And that actually was kind of fun for them because it was a race against time. Now, I will say when they get to the capitals, those were a lot harder. But anyway, so each of them would go through different things, but also there might be a section like this where it just says learn about Greece. And so you click on it and it'll tell them a little bit about Greece, and then they would talk about it from there. So what was nice is the flexibility of like, okay, I'm running out of activities to talk about Antarctica or the Arctic. So hey, let me go here and use some resources here. We also did use some videos to supplement as well. Again, when we came to specific continents where I knew we were going to be struggling to find a lot of information about. You could also do movies and things like that. So then what I did is for each of my kids, I set up their own individual account. And the website is called, when you are in here, what happens is that if you're like, okay, I want to set up my own account for myself, you have this thing here called My EP. And My EP is when you will I'm going to keep that on there because there's some, oh, I went to the wrong thing. Anyways, so you will set up your own account. It's very easy to do. And once you do it, you just put it in the name of each child. They get their own little tab that they get to click on, and it will tell them what their assignment is for that day. Now, what I learned though is some assignments only come like once a week. And so the day we would be signing on wasn't their day. So sometimes I'd have to go into the teacher settings and be like, oh, it's actually day 12 because we need to be on the right page. So anyways, with a little tweaking, you can set up your own, or you can just do this from here. So let me show you some of the ones that I added in as like additional stuff. So they have, where's the grandma? All right, so let's just start with PE. So they have a PE section. And what you can do with this is they've got a couple different ones. If I can get this, where did it go? I thought I had it. All right, well, I clicked on it. So PE and health, there's like 3 different versions. So each time they would do it, they would do different things. Now, the nice thing about PE here is they would often link to a video where they'd actually do exercises right there. They learned about fire safety. They learned about environmental safety. They learned about here's sugar and household hazards, hand washing, eating right, soccer, agility, and they do lots of different exercises and things like that. So this was a real simple PE. They have 2 variations of it. So if you do one year, you can do the next the second. For me, we were doing PE 3 times a week. So we actually rotated through this about 2 or 3 times and through the 3 variations. So PE is one thing that we did from here. And then I also had the computer, if I can find that. You know how it is when you're looking for something. Okay, so computer. They would do this is for my younger 2 kids. They basically started off at this computer first level, and it taught them how to like vocabulary of computers, but also basic stuff like clicking and what not to click and what to do if you are on a site you don't want to be on, but also creating folders and saving things into folders and using Microsoft Word. So this was kind of a great thing for my younger 2 ones to use. And then also on here, my older ones were using Spanish. So there's Spanish in here somewhere for world languages. There you go. So they had Spanish. And what I liked about Spanish when they started at this level is that they're going through cognates first for the first couple months, really. So as a foreign language teacher myself, I understand that was a good concept. So with the Spanish and French and Latin, there's a lot of similarities between them. And so what they did is they went through each language and gave you some words that were similar to each other and made the student listen to the different ways of talking to kind of get their ears perked up to listen for those specific cognates that are the same in English or the same in another language, just to kind of get their ears ready. So I really liked their Spanish program, again, as an easy introduction for younger levels to get ready. So most of the time, that's the stuff that they were doing through Easy Peasy. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else that was in here that we did. Yeah. So then my older 2, there was grammar in here somewhere too. I'm not finding it at the moment, but so grammar was one of the levels that we did through here. oh, maybe it's just language arts. I called it grammar, but it was language arts. So again, with language arts, I had to pick and choose. There were some lessons in here I didn't want my kids to do, so I just skip it because it was either too hard or too easy. But my main focus was I wanted them to be able to just get some basic grammar information from here. So that's what I use with Easy Peasy. Then I also have my older two kids practicing some coding. One of the things I recognized was that I was in this place where I'm like, I need my kids to understand how to use computers in a healthy way. I want them to use the tools that are on computers. And I myself wasn't necessarily skilled, but I knew that other people were. So I found some different, typing websites out there, but also some coding was an option because my older ones just kind of, that was my only thing that I was starting to get frustrated with Heart of Dakota was that there wasn't as much practice with things like coding and technology, which is unfortunately taking over the world. So you kind of have to do it. So if I could have added anything into my Heart of Dakota days, would have been some electives related to technology and correct usage and learning how to type and the stuff like coding, which is something that they're interested in anyway. So I'm trying to remember the coding. We have so many coding ones that we did, but there's code.org, which we used. The nice thing about code.org is you can just set up an account and then they go through an actual like learning curriculum. Like they've already set up a curriculum, they just get taught. So you can pick your grade. So like if these are mine were in, well, I had both, I guess, but let's say 6 to 12. So they're learning how to do different apps. They're learning how to create different things, which I don't know. It was just really neat. I loved watching them do this. So my kids went through this first and they did all the stuff that they could in code.org. And then we went to, this is the stuff I'm learning. So I didn't realize that Google has its own code. I think it's on Google Education. I don't remember. This has been a while since I've done this. So on Google, they have their own coding thing, and I had set up my own account. But anyways, as a teacher, you can set up an account, and then you can go to the different coding options. And I am so in the wrong place. Google coding. Oh, I'm gonna have to refer to that somewhere else. It might be this one. Anyways, so the point is that you yourself can create your own version of a coding option if that's something your kids are interested in. So let me go ahead and